One ignored warning, one moment of reckless confidence. That's all it took to turn ambitious content creators into the 6 tragically stupid deaths of all time. These aren't just freak accidents. They're chilling reminders that the pursuit of viral fame can exact the ultimate price. It was July 15, 2017, when 23-year-old Griffin McCrae made the fatal decision that would end his promising career as a freelance photographer and social media influencer. Griffin stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with an athletic build that matched his reckless confidence. Working from his cramped studio apartment in Billings, Montana, he had spent 2 years building his Instagram following to 5,000 devoted fans who eagerly awaited his next death-defying photograph. His dismissive attitude toward safety warnings had become legendary among his peers, often bragged about shots others deemed impossible. For weeks, Griffin had obsessed over an abandoned radio tower he discovered through urban exploration forums. The 200-foot structure sat isolated in rural Montana, its rusted frame promising the viral content he desperately needed to boost his stagnating engagement rates. Multiple forum users warned about structural instability, but Griffin dismissed their concerns with characteristic arrogance. His girlfriend, Brielle Knox, pleaded with him the night before, her voice trembling as she begged him to reconsider. Griffin simply laughed, telling her he had done this 100 times before while already planning his Instagram story approach. At 5:30 that morning, Griffin arrived at the remote location carrying his professional camera equipment. Wearing only sneakers, jeans, and a tank top, he completely ignored the multiple danger, unstable structure signs posted around the tower's base. His live stream began immediately, showing his followers the imposing structure against the dawn sky. The ascent started at 6:15. Griffin climbed the rusted ladder rungs methodically, pausing every 20 feet to capture selfies and update his social media. His followers watched in real time as he documented each stage of the dangerous climb, their comments mixing admiration with growing concern. At 150 feet, Griffin reached a platform where he set up his tripod. The sunrise backdrop was perfect, exactly what he had envisioned for weeks. Completely absorbed in capturing the ultimate shot, he began experimenting with increasingly dramatic poses, leaning further over the platform's edge with each attempt. The morning dew had accumulated silently on the metal surfaces, creating an invisible death trap. As Griffin attempted his most ambitious hanging pose, his sneaker lost traction on the slick platform. His desperate grab for the railing failed catastrophically when the corroded metal support gave way under his weight. The fall lasted 4.2 seconds. Griffin plummeted 150 feet, his body striking multiple crossbeams and support cables during the descent. The impacts caused severe blunt force trauma to his head, chest, and limbs before he crashed into the rocky ground below. His camera continued recording throughout the entire fatal descent until it shattered upon impact. Emergency responders discovered Griffin's body at 8:45 when Brielle called 911 after he failed to respond to her increasingly frantic messages. They found him with his phone still clutched in his hand, displaying an unsent Instagram post that would never reach his followers. The coroner's report detailed the extensive damage: fractured skull, severed spinal cord, punctured lungs, and massive internal bleeding. Griffin's final Instagram story had posted automatically before his fall, showing his confident smile against the Montana sky, unaware that death waited just moments away. 3 months later, the county demolished the abandoned radio tower, with Griffin's death serving as the catalyst for stricter enforcement of trespassing laws at dangerous abandoned structures. His Instagram account remains active, a digital memorial to the ultimate price of viral fame, forever frozen at 5,000 followers who never got to see his final, fatal shot. It was August 3, 2018, when 19-year-old Kayla Whitman's life took a devastating turn at what should have been a perfect summer night. Kayla was everything you'd expect from an Arizona State University marketing student: vibrant, social media savvy, and always ready for the next adventure. At 5 feet 4 inches with an infectious laugh, she had that magnetic personality that drew people in. But despite growing up in the desert heat of Arizona, Kayla had one surprising gap in her skill set. She never properly learned to swim. The evening started innocently enough at an upscale Scottsdale residence where her friend was celebrating a birthday. Over 50 people packed the backyard, transforming the space into a typical college party scene. Kayla arrived wearing a new bikini she'd been excited to debut, her phone already in hand for the inevitable photo session. As the night progressed, Kayla indulged in 4 mixed drinks over 2 hours, a decision that would prove fatal. Her judgment clouded. She spent over an hour posing by the pool's edge, creating content for her Instagram stories. Each photo became more daring than the last, encouraged by friends who cheered her on. The pool itself presented hidden dangers. Decorative string lights provided minimal illumination, casting deceptive shadows across the water's surface. The irregularly shaped pool lacked clear depth markers, making it impossible to distinguish the shallow end from the deep sections in the dim lighting. At 11:30 p.m., Kayla decided on one final dramatic shot. Despite multiple friends warning her about the water depth and her intoxicated state, she positioned herself for what she believed would be the perfect diving pose. Her friend Madison Reeves stood ready with the camera. What Kayla thought was the deep end was actually the 3.5-foot shallow section. She executed a forward dive with arms extended overhead, entering the water at a steep angle with devastating momentum. Her head struck the concrete bottom with tremendous force, instantly fracturing her cervical spine at the C4 to C5 vertebrae and severely compressing her spinal cord. The impact paralyzed Kayla from the neck down immediately. She sank motionless to the bottom while party guests initially assumed she was showing off underwater. After 45 agonizing seconds, Madison realized something was terribly wrong and jumped in to pull her friend to the surface. Kayla emerged unconscious, blood streaming from her nose and ears. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. She had suffered catastrophic brain damage from oxygen deprivation and spinal cord trauma. 3 hours later, Kayla was pronounced dead at the hospital due to respiratory failure caused by her high cervical spinal cord injury and secondary drowning. The promising young woman who had started the evening planning her future marketing career became another tragic statistic. The aftermath brought legal consequences for the homeowner, who faced a wrongful death lawsuit for failing to properly mark pool depths and provide adequate lighting. Kayla's story serves as a sobering reminder that a single moment of poor judgment, amplified by alcohol and inadequate safety measures, can transform celebration into tragedy in mere seconds. The ripple effects continue to impact everyone who knew her bright spirit. It was September 22nd, 2016, when 21-year-old Zane Hollowell made a decision that would cost him everything. The ambitious barista from Portland, Oregon had spent 3 years perfecting his parkour skills, transforming from a coffee shop employee into a local free-running sensation with 12,000 YouTube subscribers, hungry for increasingly dangerous content. Zane stood 5 feet 10 inches, with the lean, muscular build of someone who treated every urban obstacle as a personal challenge. His competitive nature often pushed him beyond reasonable limits, especially when his girlfriend watched from the sidelines or when his fellow traceurs questioned his commitment. Working morning shifts at a trendy downtown coffee shop gave him afternoons to train, but it was the evening sessions that truly tested his abilities. The downtown office building complex had caught his attention weeks earlier during a daylight scouting mission. The connected structures created a perfect playground of varying heights, with gaps ranging from 8 to 15 feet between rooftops. He had mapped every jump, calculated every distance, but had never attempted the sequence after dark. Despite weather reports warning of light rain, Zane arrived at 10 p.m. with his friend Colton Hayes, a fellow traceur who doubled as his cameraman. Colton, more cautious by nature, had expressed concerns about the conditions, but Zane's determination to film content for his growing channel overrode any safety considerations. The session began at 10:45 p.m., with Zane successfully navigating several smaller jumps while Colton captured multiple angles. His confidence grew with each successful landing, the familiar rush of adrenaline drowning out the sound of light rain beginning to patter against the concrete surfaces. The final jump represented the sequence's climax, a 12-foot gap between buildings with a 3-foot height difference. Zane had visualized this moment countless times, knowing it would become the centerpiece of his next viral video. He positioned himself 30 feet back from the edge, feeling the wet concrete beneath his running shoes as he prepared for his approach. The run-up felt perfect until the critical moment when his left foot encountered a slick patch of rain-soaked concrete. The slip occurred precisely at the building's edge, destroying his carefully calculated trajectory and timing. Instead of the clean, controlled leap he had practiced in his mind, Zane found himself rotating forward mid-air, his body betraying him when precision mattered most. He fell short of the target building by approximately 2 feet, his chest striking the concrete ledge with devastating force. The impact fractured multiple ribs, which immediately punctured both lungs. The collision sent him bouncing backward into a 40-foot fall down the narrow alley between buildings. Colton watched in horror as his friend's body struck the concrete below with a sickening impact that fractured Zane's pelvis and caused severe head trauma. Racing down to the alley, Colton found Zane conscious but unable to speak, blood filling his punctured lungs as he struggled for each breath. The 911 call came immediately, but the damage was too extensive. 25 minutes after the fall, before paramedics could transport him to the hospital, Zane succumbed to massive internal bleeding and respiratory failure. His pursuit of the perfect shot had ended in the most permanent way possible. The entire incident remained captured on Colton's camera, sparking widespread debate about the responsibility of documenting dangerous stunts. Building owners responded by installing additional security measures and anti-climbing barriers, ensuring that Zane's tragic miscalculation would serve as a deterrent for future thrill seekers. His YouTube channel, once a source of pride and growing influence, became a digital memorial to the risks of pushing boundaries without adequate safety measures. The 10,000 subscribers who had encouraged increasingly extreme content were left to grapple with their role in demanding the spectacular footage that ultimately cost Zane his life. It was March 14, 2019, when the Pacific Ocean claimed the life of a promising young scientist whose passion for marine life would ultimately lead to her tragic end. Madison Reeve, a 26-year-old marine biology graduate student at UC Santa Barbara, had dedicated her life to understanding the intricate ecosystems that thrived along California's rugged coastline. Standing 5 feet 6 inches with shoulder-length brown hair, Madison possessed an almost obsessive attention to detail that made her research exceptional, but sometimes dangerous. Her professors knew her as the student who would spend hours crouched over tide pools, completely absorbed in her work. On that fateful Thursday afternoon, Madison drove to a remote stretch of Big Sur's rocky coastline, her backseat loaded with research equipment for her thesis on sea anemone populations. Despite warnings from local fishermen about the area's notorious sneaker waves, she felt confident in her coastal fieldwork experience. Her advisor had suggested bringing a research partner, but Madison declined, preferring to work alone. At 2 p.m. during an extremely low tide, Madison positioned herself on a rocky outcrop roughly 50 feet from the high tide line. She methodically arranged her sample containers, waterproof cameras, and measurement tools around her workspace. The tide pools were spectacular that day, teeming with colorful sea anemones. For over 2 hours, Madison worked with laser focus, photographing specimens and recording measurements. She was particularly excited about a cluster of unusually large anemones in a deep pool. The rhythmic sound of waves against rocks became background noise as she lost herself in her research. At 4:30 p.m., crouched low over her specimens, Madison remained oblivious to the rapidly changing conditions. The tide had begun its aggressive return, and a distant storm system was generating increasingly powerful swells. The first warning came at 4:47 p.m., when a larger wave crashed behind her, soaking her equipment and jolting her from her scientific trance. Looking up for the first time in over an hour, Madison felt a chill of recognition. The water level had risen dramatically, and waves were now breaking much closer to her position. She quickly began gathering her equipment, her movements becoming frantic as she realized the danger. The massive sneaker wave that struck moments later was estimated at 15 feet high. Madison had no time to react as the wall of water crashed over her rocky outcrop with tremendous force. The impact swept her off the rocks and into the churning surf, where she was immediately pulled underwater by the powerful undertow. The ocean showed no mercy. Sharp, barnacle-covered rocks became weapons as the waves repeatedly slammed her against the submerged coastline. Severe lacerations opened across her head, arms, and torso, while her heavy, waterlogged clothing dragged her deeper. Despite her swimming ability, Madison could not overcome the combination of her injuries and the relentless ocean forces. The current carried her approximately 200 yards offshore before she finally succumbed to drowning, her body disappearing beneath the dark Pacific waters that had been both her passion and her destroyer. 3 days later, Coast Guard vessels recovered Madison's body. The coroner determined that she had died from drowning, complicated by severe blunt force trauma and blood loss. Madison's death sent shockwaves through the marine biology community at UC Santa Barbara. Her research advisor immediately implemented new safety protocols requiring all coastal fieldwork to be conducted in pairs with emergency communication devices. Her family, determined that their daughter's death would not be in vain, funded the installation of warning signs at the location where Madison died. The signs specifically warn visitors about the danger of sneaker waves, serving as a permanent reminder of how quickly the ocean's beauty can turn deadly. Madison Reeves' unfinished thesis on sea anemone populations was posthumously completed by her colleagues and published in her honor, ensuring that her scientific contributions would live on, even as her promising career was cut tragically short. It was June 8, 2015, when nature claimed its most stubborn victim on the pristine fairways of Tampa's exclusive West Shore Country Club. Colton Hayes, a 28-year-old regional sales manager for a prominent medical device company, embodied the relentless drive that made him successful in business. Standing 6 feet 1 inch with a stocky athletic build, Colton possessed an almost pathological inability to quit anything he started. This trait served him well in closing million-dollar deals, but it would prove fatal on that sweltering Florida afternoon. Colton had earned his reputation as the golfer who played through anything. Rain, wind, even hail couldn't drive him from the course. His twice-weekly rounds at West Shore were sacred rituals, and today's tournament qualifier represented months of preparation. He'd been chasing this opportunity since February, practicing his short game until his hands bled, determined to earn his spot in the regional championship. The meteorologists had been clear that morning. Severe thunderstorms would pummel the Tampa Bay area by 4 p.m. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon as Colton teed off at 2 p.m., but he dismissed the warnings with characteristic confidence. He'd outrun storms before. His playing partners had already retreated to the clubhouse, but Colton pressed on alone, muttering about fair-weather golfers. By 3:45 p.m., Colton stood on the 14th tee as the first lightning strikes flickered within 5 miles. The course management sounded the warning horn, its urgent wail echoing across the manicured landscape. Other golfers abandoned their carts and sprinted toward the clubhouse, but Colton barely glanced up. He had 4 holes remaining, and his score was too good to waste. The wind intensified as he approached the 16th green, bending palm trees at impossible angles. Rain began in fat, warm drops that quickly became a torrential downpour. Lightning crackled overhead with increasing frequency, each flash illuminating Colton's determined silhouette as he lined up his crucial putt. At 4:10 p.m., as Colton crouched over his putter just 3 feet from the metal flagstick, the storm unleashed its full fury. The lightning bolt that found him carried 30,000 amperes of pure electrical energy, striking the flagstick and traveling through the saturated ground into his metal spikes. The current surged through Colton's body like liquid fire, entering through his feet and exiting through his hands gripping the metal putter. His heart stopped instantly. The electrical pathway carved devastating burns along his torso, hands, and feet, while the massive discharge hurled his 190-pound frame 8 feet backward from the flagstick. Golfers watching from the clubhouse windows witnessed the brilliant flash that consumed their colleague. They found Colton motionless on the rain-soaked green, his clothing still smoldering, severe burns marking the lightning's deadly path through his body. The acrid smell of burned flesh mixed with ozone filled the humid air. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, their advanced life support equipment battling against nature's overwhelming force. For 45 minutes, they administered CPR and repeated defibrillation attempts. But Colton's competitive spirit had finally met an opponent it couldn't overcome. The tragedy transformed West Shore Country Club's safety protocols forever. Lightning detection systems now mandate immediate course evacuation when electrical activity appears within 8 miles. In the end, the man who never quit anything had finally encountered something that wouldn't quit on him. It was January 19, 2017, when 24-year-old Brielle Knox made a decision that would cost her everything. The freelance photographer had moved from sunny California to Duluth, Minnesota just 6 months earlier, drawn by stunning winter landscapes that would set her portfolio apart. Brielle stood 5'5" with flowing blonde hair she often left uncovered, despite brutal Minnesota winters. Her artistic eye was undeniable, but her impulsive nature and tendency to dismiss safety warnings from seasoned outdoor enthusiasts had earned her a reputation among local photography groups. She prioritized the perfect shot over practical precautions, often choosing fashion over function. That frigid morning, temperatures plummeted to -15 degrees Fahrenheit. Local authorities had issued warnings about unpredictable ice conditions following a recent warm spell, but Brielle dismissed these concerns as overly cautious. She arrived at the popular frozen lake at 6 a.m., determined to capture the sunrise for her growing Instagram following. Carrying 20 pounds of camera equipment in her backpack, Brielle wore fashionable boots instead of proper winter gear. Local ice fishermen approached her near the shore, explaining that ice thickness measured only 3 to 4 inches in many areas, well below the 6-inch minimum recommended for safe walking. She brushed off their warnings with a confident smile. At 6:45 a.m., Brielle ventured approximately 100 yards from shore, chasing the perfect angle of sunrise reflecting off the ice surface. Occasional cracking sounds echoed beneath her feet, but she pressed forward, focused entirely on her artistic vision. Setting up her tripod for a long exposure shot, she heard a loud crack and felt the ice shift beneath her weight. Instead of retreating to safety, Brielle attempted to quickly capture her planned photographs. As she moved to a different position, her weight caused a 6-foot diameter section of thin ice to give way completely. She plunged into the 34-degree water below, her heavy camera equipment immediately dragging her downward. The shock of frigid water triggered an involuntary gasp response, causing Brielle to inhale water as she struggled beneath the surface. Her waterlogged winter clothing became impossibly heavy, while her expensive camera gear continued pulling her deeper. She fought desperately to reach the surface and grab the ice edge, but the thin ice continued breaking away under her weight. Within 2 minutes, the extreme cold water caused rapid loss of muscle control and coordination. Brielle could no longer swim effectively or climb out, her movements becoming increasingly sluggish. Her camera equipment, once her pride and joy, now served as an anchor, dragging her toward the lake bottom. After approximately 4 minutes in the water, hypothermia and drowning claimed Brielle's consciousness. Her body sank beneath the ice sheet, where underwater currents carried her away from the original breakpoint, making rescue efforts exponentially more difficult. Ice fishermen who heard her initial cries for help immediately called 911, but rescue divers faced challenging conditions searching beneath the unstable ice. They didn't recover Brielle's body until 6 hours later, approximately 200 yards from where she had fallen through. The coroner determined the cause of death as drowning complicated by severe hypothermia. Brielle's core body temperature had dropped to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Her camera equipment, still strapped to her body, had prevented any chance of survival. The tragic incident prompted Duluth city officials to install additional warning signs about dangerous ice conditions and establish a real-time ice thickness monitoring system. Brielle's death served as a stark reminder that nature's beauty often conceals deadly dangers, and no photograph is worth risking human life. If these tragic tales left you stunned, brace yourself for what's next. Click the video on your screen for more shocking stories of people who paid the ultimate price for deadly decisions.